The invasions across the European continent by Germany continues. There is mass chaos across the continent, and there is one man, one mind, one corporal that Winston Churchill calls on. This man's name was Percy Hobart, a tank mastermind. A man that thought everyone's opinion mattered for what he was about to create to help save his home country as well as the countries that fought alongside it. As growing up in a military family, Hobart knew the ins and outs of warfare and what needed to be accomplished. The creation of Hobart's Funnies was a tremendous alteration and success in the way tanks were being used in World War II. With a complex personality that was often misunderstood, people can't deny that he was a key factor in helping win World War II for the Allies. Born in India in 1885, his father was a civil servant stationed in India at the time when Percy was being born. From a very young age, Hobart was familiar with war. After he graduated from Clifton College, he began his military career by attending the Royal Military Academy in Woolwich in the year 1902. Hobart served in World War I and received a Military Cross in 1915. Then, in the following year, in 1916, he served as a part of the Indian Army Infantry Brigade in what is now known as Iraq. Here in Iraq, he was wounded, was taken prisoner by some Turks, and also won a Distinguished Service Order Award. In the time following, he would be promoted to Brigade Major for his work on the Forge on Baghdad as well as Megiddo in 1917.
What's interesting, I think, about Hobart, if you find anything out about his career, he's gone, he's sacked, he's forget him in 1940. He's a grumpy old man who's been really good at training soldiers with tanks. Everyone thinks he's a bit prickly, is the word that sometimes comes across.
In 1919, Hobart attended the Staff College in Camberley, where he and H. Maitland Jumbo Wilson were associated with each other by being fellow students. However, their relationship was very resentful. In 1923, Hobart had joined the Royal Tank Corps, where he was an instructor for the Staff College in what is now Pakistan. In 1931, Hobart moved back to England, where he would be the head of the 2nd Battalion RTC. Then, just 2 years later, he would become Inspector General of the Royal Tank Corps, where he became friends with military historian and writer Basil Liddell Hart. With all of his tank knowledge and training, Hobart was training men in the 7th Armored Division, that were called the Desert Rats, stationed in Egypt in 1938. It wasn't just the Allies that knew about Hobart's tank knowledge. However, the Germans had known about Hobart's capabilities. When Hobart returned to London, Hobart returned as quite the opposite of a hero. He dealt with criticism. Other military officials were not pleased with his short-tempered manner and the way he spoke his mind. In 1939, Jumbo Wilson met up with General Gordon Finlayson that Hobart worked with in Egypt the year prior, and Gordon Finlayson was not a fan of Hobart's manner at the slightest. When Wilson suggested to Hobart that the mobile division do an operation, Wilson immediately found a problem. When the operation was over, Hobart and Wilson confronted each other. On November 10, 1939, just 2 months into World War II, Wilson wrote a letter suggesting that Hobart should be replaced, stating that there was no confidence in his ability to command the armored division to their satisfaction, and also stated, "I request, therefore, that a new commander be appointed to the armored division."
Wilson basically sacked him, and he's sent back to the United Kingdom. And he actually goes. I don't know if you've read this story, or you're going to ask me about this later on. But he's out of the military. He goes along and joins something called near where he lives. It's a place called Chipping Camden, and he joins the Home Guard.
When Hobart left Egypt, the mobile division troops cheered him on, as Hobart had taught them so many skills, like how to improvise equipment when times were short, and taught them innovation skills. Under Hobart, they also learned more about their vehicles, weapons, and working with others. 6 months after his departure, the 7th Armored Division had used some of Hobart's tactics they learned and conquered the Italian army in battle. Now being demoted from Major General to Lance Corporal, Hobart was on forced retirement and on retirement pay. Hobart had a fierce personality. However, if Hobart had an idea, it didn't matter who it was. He would ask opinions on his idea.
He doesn't care who he asks for the information and the expertise he needs. So famously, he will ask the driver of his car, "What do you think of this?" At the same time, he'll ask the chief scientific advisor to the Winston Churchill.
Hobart didn't only come up with the funnies. However, he has been credited with coming up with the blitzkrieg tactic. Though, since the other officers didn't like him very much, they rarely ever used this tactic. Hobart wasn't a fan of many Army traditions and referred to it as military buffoonery. In August of 1940, Liddell Hart wrote an article entitled, "We Have Wasted Brains." This article was to help get back into service not just Hobart, but all the military men that had been moved to different positions because of the men higher ranked than them. This article was immediately sent to Winston Churchill. After Churchill read this, he knew they needed Hobart back.
Winston Churchill is famous for this phrase, "action this day." He would write it on a piece of paper, or someone would send him a report, and he says, "Action this day, get that man back."
With the newly promoted Major General Hobart, he became the leader in a team of the 79th Armored Division. Hobart was one that thought ahead of the game. He was thinking what could potentially be the saving factor for my country and the Allies. Here came the creation of Hobart's Funnies. However, some tanks were old ideas, but just with a few tweaks here and there. Avery tanks, which stand for Armored Vehicle Royal Engineers, would be modified to have adjustments made. One of the Avery tanks, the fascine carrier, could carry a bundle of sticks and drop the bundle so that tanks could cross over big trenches or holes. A bobbin was a big roll of matting that could be unrolled, like the bundle of sticks, which helped tanks and other machinery cross blue clay, instead of wasting precious minutes to find a new route. Flail tanks, also known as the Sherman Crab, had a drum on the front of the tanks that would strike the ground and blow up mines, as well as tearing up barbed wire. Next, we have the Crocodile, which was a flamethrower put on a tank. The Crocodile tanks were hooked up to an armored trailer that could carry up to 400 gallons of fuel. The AVLB carried a foldable bridge that helped tanks get over ponds and other gaping holes. The last set of tanks would be the DD tanks, which were not actually a part of the 79th Division. These DD tanks could float on water and were mainly used on D-Day. The DD tanks would float on water to the mainland. These tanks were used across Europe during World War II and had amazing success. Later, in 1943, General Percy Hobart would be knighted for his accomplishments. Percy Hobart had a great mind that was used for the greater good. He also knew how to communicate what he was thinking and took criticism from anyone. He knew the ins and outs of war and warfare since he was young, then growing into a man and trying to implement what he thought would work. Finally, being promoted to Major General after one meeting with Winston Churchill, who knew he needed Hobart on the team, and created great tanks and war tactics that helped the Allies win World War II. Who knows where we would be without Hobart's brilliant mind and inventions to the armored tank. Hobart was one man, one mind that I would definitely describe as an unsung hero.